David Ruffin was an American soul singer and a musician, most famous for his work as one of the lead singers of the Temptations. David was only a part of the Temptations for about 4 years, but made such an impact that to this day, people still connect Ruffin as the main lead singer of the Temptations. He put his mark on every song that he sang. His raspy and soulful tenor vocals were instrumental in making the Temptations one of the greatest groups of all time. Ruffin found occasional success, but experienced a hard road, allegedly dying of a cocaine overdose in 1990. But Ruffin's family believes Ruffin's death was a setup.
But as a result of his death, I felt like my dad was set up by a lady by the name.
David Ruffin was born Davis Eli Ruffin on January 18, 1941 in Wynot, Mississippi. His father, Eli Ruffin, was a Baptist minister. Only months after his birth, his mother, Ophelia Ruffin, died, and his father later remarried a school teacher. Ruffin had 4 siblings. Ruffin's father was strict and allegedly violent, abusive at times. In 1955, at the age of 14, he left home under the guardianship of a minister, Eddie Bush. After moving to Detroit with the Bushes, Ruffin recorded his first released record with the songs You and I and Believe Me. These songs were recorded at Vega Records and released under the name Little David Bush, using the last name of his guardian. Ruffin later recalled how he initially recorded a different kind of music influenced by the smoother pop and R&B of that time. In 1957, Ruffin met Berry Gordy Jr., who then was a songwriter with dreams of running his own label. Ruffin lived with Gordy's father as a contractor and helped Pops Gordy do construction work on the building that would become Hitsville, USA, the headquarters for Gordy's Tamla Records and later Motown Records label.
And I used to work for Pop Gordy, Barry's father. And physically labor, I have built Motown with my hands. Yeah. His father was a contractor, and I lived with him and his mother.
Ruffin had 2 marriages. In 1961, he married Sandra Barnes, with whom he had 3 daughters, Cheryl, Nitra, and Kimberly. He had a son, David Ruffin Jr., with Jenna Sophia, his longtime lover, whom he met in 1964. His second marriage was to Joy Hamilton in 1976. David joined the Temptations in 1964, who had yet to chart a hit at Motown Records. The Temptations' hit list status changed in March of 1965 with the classic My Girl, on which David sang lead. The song stayed at #1 for 8 weeks, and the rest is history. The same talent that brought David into the R&B industry caught the attention of fans around the world. His stage performance was dynamic. David took the Temptations to another level once he got into the group. With all of the success, David had a big ego. Once the group started making money, David purchased his own limo and with David Ruffin and his glasses painted on the side and a meek rug in the back seat, while the group followed in a station wagon. David stated that he offered the group to ride in a limo, but the group did not take up that offer. That is when trouble began with the group.
Well, all the headlines said I was fired, but I don't see how you could fire someone out of a group of that magnitude. I just think that was time for a change, and life lands a crushing blow sometimes, But there were some differences business-wise, and at that time, things just could not be smoothed out. And there will come a day that I will tell the whole story. But certain little things, Sometimes people want to travel one certain way, someone else wants to travel another way. And I guess you heard about the limousine with the glasses. And everyone else was riding the station wagon, so I guess that wasn't too appropriate, but they could have rolled with me if they wanted to.
David began using cocaine, not showing up for rehearsals, and not showing up until the last minute for shows. He wanted to be able to do his own thing. At that time, groups such as the Supremes went to Diana Ross and the Supremes, and the Miracles went to Smokey Robinson and the Miracles. David wanted the group to be called David Ruffin and the Temptations and began demanding the change, and he also wanted to be paid more. That change never happened, and David was removed from the group. In 1968, David filed a suit against Motown Records claiming economic punitive damages and asking to get out of his contract. David lost that suit and was the first Motown artist to demand regular accounting of the group's financial status in order to know how the money was being handled, which caused friction between David and Berry Gordy.
He felt that the record company was deliberately put them in a hole and did not want him to succeed.
David had filed suit against Motown in 1968, claiming economic peonage and asking to be let out of his contract, which ran until 1975. He lost.
David was the first culprit against Berry Gordy. He talked about Berry Gordy for many years.
In 1968, David went on to be a solo artist but was still under contract at Motown. His solo career got off to a promising start with the ballad My Whole World Ended the Moment You Left Me, but did not end well. He felt the record company was blackballing him intentionally. Over the next years, Ruffin suffered drug addiction, several arrests, his career declining, and he also lost his home.
In 1982, his personal problems compounded.
Went to jail for tax evasion.
He lost the house due to income taxes.
He never really had a permanent home after that.
In 1989, David and Eddie Kendricks began touring with ex-Temptation Dennis Edwards, and after a successful month-long tour in England, David was clean the whole tour. They returned to the States, and David went to Philadelphia. On June 1, 1990, Ruffin reportedly collapsed at a drug house and was driven and dropped off to the hospital of the University of Pennsylvania, where he was declared dead. Allegedly, David wanted help before his death and stated that he did not want to continue to use drugs. Just like so many other entertainers, Ruffin's family believed that his death was a setup and did not like how the news articles were portraying his death. Although the cause of death was ruled an accident, Ruffin's family and friends suspected foul play, claiming that a money belt containing $40,000 was missing from his body. Ruffin's daughter, NikkiTrue Ruffin, stated in an interview that her dad was beaten and fought for his life, and how as a child they had to have bodyguards going to public school.
It bothers me that in every documentation they say he died of a cocaine overdose, because that doesn't define his life.
He was so much more than a drug addict and so much more than just an entertainer. He was my father, my dad.
I don't like how it reads. I don't like how it looks. I don't like how it sounds. My father didn't die in a crack house. My dad died in the hospital. My father didn't die in a crack house. He died in a hospital.
Whatever he wanted out of, 2 weeks later, he was deceased. When my daddy flew here from Philadelphia, his body was flown. My daddy talked to me. I was the last person to literally have a physical conversation with my dad just a couple of hours before his death. My dad was sober. Dennis and Eddie say he had been sober the whole European trip. Yeah, relapse is a reality, but it's not a requirement. My daddy said he was clean. My daddy said he found some property he wanted to buy in Vegas. My daddy told me he gonna buy me that car I always wanted. He was clean. But guess what? When I examined his body, Swan says, I want to see my dad. And when I examined him with my mother and my siblings, I pulled the sheet off of him. My daddy had scratches all on his neck, his chest, his knees were scraped up, top of his feet was scraped up. Whatever he did, he fought somebody for his life. He had a good fight. When my father passed away on June 1st, 1990, we wanted to get a second autopsy, me and my sisters and my brother. And my dad's oldest brother, who was not in the entertainment business, my Uncle Quincy, set my daddy 3 daughters down, and it wasn't my brother, but the daughters. And he said, if y'all do another autopsy, one of y'all gonna be laying right next to him. And we never did the second autopsy because my uncle told me that we wasn't gonna make it, that somebody was gonna do something to us, and at one point in my life as a child, my daddy had filed something against Motown, and my daddy ended up hurt, and then we ended up with bodyguards going to public school. My daddy had been clean for a couple of months, right? And he was so excited. My daddy had, I think it was over $50,000 in a money belt. He always carried a money belt. And a money belt you carry up under your clothes, around your waist. He had something like between $20,000 to $40,000 worth of traveling checks. But whatever it was, I believe somebody gave my daddy a hot shot. I asked, they shipped my daddy's body here in a box, and they said his clothes was with him. His clothes wasn't with him, because when my mama and my sisters went to Philadelphia, and they went to the coroner's office, and they pulled his file, a picture fell out of his file, and the guy put his foot over it. And my sister Kim happened to see it, and she said, what's that? She looked at it. It looked like my dad had been drowned. His head was big like a basketball. And my dad has a very slim face like mine. And as a result of it, my dad, when he flew here, his clothes was not in the box. We found out that his clothes was very bloody, and they destroyed and burnt his clothes in Philadelphia. They destroyed the evidence of his clothes in Philadelphia and burnt his clothes up in the incinerator. And the death of my dad, everything that has been said, the truth is going to come out through his family, his wife Sandra, and his daughters Cheryl, Kimberly, and Nidra. But as a result of his death, my dad had told me that he would be home in 2 weeks in the phone conversation that we had. And the day that he said he'd be here, he came home that day, but it was in a box, so that my whole world I thought was ended. Like that song, My Whole World Ended. My whole world had literally ended, because my dad was my best friend. He was like my everything to me. And it was like, I felt like I was going to die when my dad passed away. I didn't even have the motivation to even want to stick around for my children. That's when I had suicidal thoughts, But as a result of his death, I felt like my dad was set up by a lady by the name of Diane Showers. I will say her name. My dad was never thrown out at a hospital out of a limousine. No, he was pronounced who he was at the hospital and everything. But at the same time, he never speedballed. They said my daddy had heroin and cocaine in his system. My dad never messed with heroin a day in his life. Not one day in his life. And I do know that, you could use another drug and substitute one for another, but he never did that. You know what I'm saying? So as a direct result, I just want to tell the world that my daddy was clean. Somebody set him up for that money, and somebody took his...
Rest in peace, David Ruffin. January 18, 1941 until June 1st, 1990. And if you made it to the end of this video and enjoyed the video, I ask you to give me a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and hit that bell so you will be notified when I upload another video. And I also ask you to comment down below and tell me what you think of this video. Thanks for watching.